Hi, I'm Quincas and I'm a synth DIY guy. Welcome to the channel and welcome to today's video. I'm really excited to introduce to you the 3-body FPGA based triple digital oscillator by Schlappi Engineering. Eric Schlappi sent me this a little while ago and I've been having fun with it ever since. It's very unique and complex module. The idea is to bring digital oscillator synthesis techniques to an analog interface. So let me just explain a little bit of what it does. Basically, you have 3 oscillators. The center one, where you see it's the silver knobs, indicate the controls for the central oscillator, and then you have 2 oscillators one on each side here, the outer oscillators. They're all very similar. They're not completely identical. There's a couple of differences, but mainly they can be operated in audio rate as well as sub-audio rate as LFOs and such. And they can also be free-flowing or based on ratios, where CV control and knob control will sort of skip around in harmonic series in different ways. You can control all 3 oscillators separately, independently, if you like, but there are also a lot of cross-modulation built into it via the normalizations that happen. I'm not gonna really go through every single technical detail as it's found on the manual, because Schlappi Design already did an overview video covering that. The manual has all that detailed information. We're just gonna sort of dive into it and have some fun with it and listen to what kind of cool sounds you can make. It can be totally used as a single standalone instrument. I've done that a lot. I really enjoy playing it that way, actually. Just playing it itself, feeding it back into itself, cross-modulating itself, and so on. So let's just turn up volume here and start listening to the central oscillator here. The central oscillator, one of the differences compared to the other ones is that it has 2 outputs for the sine wave, the sine and the cosine, right, which are phase shifted outputs, and right now I have them routed to left and right, so that makes them stereo, right? Right here are the switches that determine how it's gonna function, and we have it free flowing right now, so turning the knob you can fluidly control the frequency. As you can see on my oscilloscope and hear it, it's a very fine and clean sine wave, and you can go pretty high without hearing any kind of aliasing or artifacts. You get that right off the bat. You can control it via CV. I have a Keystep Pro just out of camera here, but trust me, it's here. I'm going to connect output of voice 1, pitch output of voice 1 to the volt per octave input on this one. Right? So already you can see it's very well in tune. Now I can also send it phase modulation, right? So for example, why don't we get a sine wave from over here, from my sine wave bank, and send that to the phase input, right? And here we have the phase index knob, which is a VCA that controls how much of that phase modulation goes in. And I don't know if you can see, the blue trace on my oscilloscope is a little weak, but already we can see that phase shifting relative to the sine. So this is affecting the cosine wave, really. Why don't we send another modulation source, a different LFO, over to the other phase index, and we'll send it to phase 2 here and turn on phase 2 index. And now that's affecting both sine and cosine. Very cool, right? And I can use audio rate as well. So why don't we take an output of the middle path here, triangle, So that's phase modulation right here. Right, we got the index up high. Now if I turn the index down, and we'll no longer hear it, but now I can use an LFO to externally control that index. So we have phase 1 index available right here on the panel, and now this becomes an attenuator for that input. So now the LFO is determining when that audio rate oscillation is going to affect phase 1, right? This also can be audio rate. Like if I take it from the other side of my middle path VCO here, now we have, it's sort of like an amplitude modulation, right? Because the index is a VCA that controls the amount of phase modulation. So now we have already quite interesting sounds happening here. And again, I still play it with the keyboard here. And that's going to affect the central frequency of that oscillator. One of the cool things about the Three Body is that it's got all these normalizations. So if I have nothing plugged into the phase inputs here, then the outer oscillators become modulation sources for the phase over here. So like this one, let's put it on high here, or rather it's this one. Okay, let's put it on high here. So now we got audio rate modulation of phase 1, right? Still controlled by the index knob. So as I turn the index knob up, I'm applying the left side oscillator to phase modulation of the central oscillator. And right there, that's really cool. Now, if I use the volt per octave input over here, that will affect all oscillators, right? So both my modulating oscillator and my sounding oscillator, so to speak, are now controllable via the keyboard. So you can create these very 80s synthesis technique type sounds, like Chowning FM, which is actually phase modulation rather than frequency modulation. It's just called frequency modulation. Correct me if I'm wrong, people. So already this sounds very modern, very digital, right? Very beautiful, very crystalline, very nice. So let's remove the keyboard control for now and go back to just using the knobs here. And yeah, see, this is already so much fun just to play around and get some crazy sounds. Now we have phase 2 here is oscillator on the right side, right? So same thing, and the index again is the VCA that determines how much of that modulation source is making it over there. So let's turn both of them on now and check that out. Now I've got left side affecting phase 1 and right side affecting phase 2. And we start getting some crazier, gnarlier tones. And again, in stereo, right? Because we're using the sine and cosine outputs panned hard left and right. So right there, this is super cool. If you send it to like stereo effects, already you can do like a whole show just playing with this. Now let's send a slow LFO to transpose here and see what that does. Right, very cool. Now you can modulate the frequency as well, right? So let's Let's turn off the phase indexes here and go back to listening to that pure sine and send an audio rate triangle wave to FM here, right? And right now I'm using an external oscillator, but of course you can also patch internally. You can grab any of these extra outputs here. We do have a triangle output from left side oscillator, and now we're modulating the frequency of the center oscillator rather than the phase. Alright? And now we can even bring up the index for phase 2 here, which is being controlled by the right side oscillator. And we can also bring the range down to low, and that becomes an LFO now. But actually, let's do that to this one, because this one, the one that's affecting phase, won't be as noticeable. But this one is. And this is the FMCV attenuator right here. You can bring it down and control the amount of FM that you want, right? So now the left side oscillator is acting as an LFO because it's in low or divided mode here. When you're free flowing, then the labels that apply are the left side labels, high and low. All right, now let's have a look at the ratio mode. Okay, so we'll bring down the FM, we'll bring down the index, and we're back to listening to that pure sine wave. Let's take off the FM here. Now as we apply phase modulation 1 here from oscillator left, or oscillator 1, we're going to put this one in ratio mode, right? And if I have my fine on the first position, then the mult knob, right, it's no longer coarse now, it's now mult, because we're putting it in ratio mode. So there's basically two operating modes, free and ratio, right? And they'll change how the knobs act. So this is division. The fine becomes division and coarse becomes mult. And this is going to skip through the 16 steps of the harmonic series, right? If I put division on 2, that'll be half of that. It'll be, you know, divide those ratios in half, and so on. So the steps actually get closer and closer as I move the division up and down. But you see how it acts in steps now, rather than continuously, right? If I put it in free, we have this continuous control. Whereas in ratio, it'll be stepped. All right. And now the switch from high and low, as you can hear, it doesn't really change anything. What it does now is it determines where the CV is going to go. If it's going to go to multiplication or division. All right. So let's send an LFO to that input here, right? And right now it's going to multiplication. If I turn it down, it's going to division. Right? Very cool. Let's turn off phase 2 index up here to make it a little crazier, a little gnarlier. Right? Very cool, right? Why don't we take another LFO and send that to FM of oscillator 3, right side oscillator. We'll turn that up. FM index, there we go. Cool. We can put this one in ratio as well. Right? So now the FM index is also normaled, and it's normaled from the cosine of oscillator 2, the central oscillator. Right? So they're actually cross-modulating all the time if you start turning up these knobs without anything plugged in. And that can get to pretty noisy places, right? As you get audio rate modulation of one thing back to modulating the first one and so on. Like feedback patching basically, right? So this is pretty noisy right here. You can get it to pretty close to white noise if you go extreme enough. In fact, yeah, like right here, it's pretty much like a white noise. Let's play around with that ratio modulation again. We'll turn this guy back up, and it is in ratio. So now we have chorus again becomes multi, and fine becomes division, right? And now I can turn the FM index here, and we do audio rate modulation of this oscillator with this guy over here. And I can put it low to make it more like an LFO, see? And now we can also listen to the outer oscillators. I have them connected as well. So that's them right here. All right, also in left and right. So we have them panned hard left and right here. So now if I put everybody in audio rate and free, let's see, audio rate free, and this one as well, high is audio rate, like, then we start, and now we're listening to 4 signals, right? We're listening to the sine and cosine from the middle oscillator, and we're listening to the outer oscillators also panned hard left and right. And listen to that madness. Let's bring up some more of those cross modulations, but we'll try to make them subtle. Just use a little bit of index. Alright, let me plug my keyboard back into the transpose input. Again, the transpose input affects all 3 oscillators simultaneously. Right, so if you want to play with a keyboard, you can always do that with any sound that you find on this thing. Alright, let's bring these down again. And now we're just listening to the 3 oscillators independently. Right? You can actually find some cool chords that way. Maybe let's build a chord. That's a nice chord right there. Let's play it with the keyboard. Let me do a quick sequence here. If you want to see the other oscillators, I can turn them on my scope here too. It becomes kind of a garbled mess, but it's fun to look at. Alright, let's put one of these in LFO mode. And maybe send modulation to the FM input here. So I'm affecting the frequency of oscillator 3 with the triangle wave from oscillator 1 here. And it's changing speeds, the LFO is changing speeds because it's still being controlled by the keyboard. So it's key tracking, right? That's what that's called. Another thing you can change, there's another little switch here, which is exponential and linear. So you can change the FM mode, see? So right now it's kind of subdued, right? The LFO affecting oscillator 3. If I put it in exponential, it becomes much more extreme, much wider, right? And I can do that to all 3 of them, like linear or exponential for all of them. Very cool. Alright, let's turn this up. Take it all out again. And now I'm going to turn off the middle oscillator, and we're just going to listen to the outer ones. Right? And now the middle one is basically just modulating the other ones via the normalizations. And you can see more details about what these normalizations are in the manual, but they're actually indicated right here. So for example, phase CV, it's written right here, sine 3. So this is getting its normaled to the output of the sine wave from the third oscillator. Right, the FM index here is coming sine 2. It's getting its CV from second oscillator sine wave. So here we go. We have middle oscillator acting as an LFO, right? It's in low here. And we can turn up the indices to get it to be modulated by the audio rate source of the other ones. This one, let's put that one in audio rate as well. Now listen to that. Super cool stereo effect. And by the way, we're only listening to the sine wave outputs. There's triangle, saw, and square as well for each one, right? So that's going to be brighter and harsher. Let's take a saw from one and square from the other. And yeah, now we have a harsher sound, right? Just bring up the indices and get it noisier. Okay. Gets pretty gnarly, pretty experimental and noisy, which is total Schlappi territory. Cool. All right, let's bring these down again and get it back to more comprehensive. And we can sync this module with something external as well. So why not take a pulse wave from my middle path VCO here. We'll stick that into the sync input here. And now, and there's sync inputs for all three oscillators. Let's go back to the sine wave here, or maybe a triangle this time. All right. And you get those cool sync sounds. Send an LFO here for that to the frequency modulation of oscillator 3. Turn up the FM index. And now we're hearing that classic sort of FM sync sound, rather. Let's grab another LFO here, slow one, and we'll frequency modulate oscillator 1. Turn up FM index. Start turning up some of these phase CVs and play around with the frequency of the central oscillator. Listen to that. Listen to that madness. Let's get a random kind of a sequence out of the Kermit here. Hold on. No presets, and we want the type to be random, and rather than smooth random, we want stepped random. So now we have a stepped random coming out of output A here. We'll put that on FM for, or what per octave for oscillator central oscillator. We'll put it in audio rate again. Make this faster. And now we can turn up the audio in that middle oscillator there. Listen to that. 4 outputs being used, sent to my audio interface right now. I can turn down the outer ones, and we can just listen to that middle oscillator being modulated by the Kermit's random stepped voltage. And now let's turn up the phase indices and start modulating the phases of the middle oscillator. That one in LFO, this one as well. Now the outer oscillators are both acting as LFOs. Ah, that's beautiful. It's really beautiful. Now if I bring up their volume, you won't really hear much because they're at audio rate. Let's put, sub-audio rate. Let's put them back into high. Here. Let's put them in ratio mode with the index, or rather with the division down low, so we get a wide variation. And we can turn up the FM index. And that sounds super nice. So cool. And we're still syncing it with this guy. So I can still turn the... But we're syncing only oscillator 3, right? With the middle path. Let's also sync oscillator 1. So I'm gonna send this to sync over here. And that's middle path VCO left side, so number 1. Now I can modulate these guys with these guys if I want. Continue the feedback cross modulation madness. We'll take saw wave from this guy and we'll put it on FM of this guy, and we'll get the sine wave from this guy and stick it in FM for this one, or actually invert them. Let's invert them so that they're not modulating frequency. They're not receiving frequency modulation from the oscillator. They're syncing. They're switched. Now listen to that madness. Okay, let's turn up the speed here on the random voltage. Crazy. Now if I bring up the coarse frequency here, suddenly sometimes it goes quiet because it's going so high that it's inaudible. Okay, put it back in low, or try linear and ratio. Yeah, at this point I don't even know what I'm doing anymore. I'm just having fun turning knobs and listening to sounds. It gets to a point where it's so complex that you can hardly keep track of what you're doing anymore. So fun though. It's definitely one of my favorite modules nowadays. I like to bring it out to play by itself with some effects, and already quite a racket. If you want to use it in more conventional contexts, you can as well, because you can create a sound that you want and then use it as a percussive sound and send it to a VCA and trigger it. So you can make like snare drums, hi-hats, and crazy sounds that way. Right now we've been just letting it drone endlessly, which is also cool. Okay, so let's get rid of all this external modulation here and bring down the normalizations again. Ooh, that's a beautiful sounding drone right there. How about I use my joystick? I don't think you can see my joystick down here. I guess I might as well use the CV out from my battle module, because that you can't see me do. We'll send that to the transpose here. Let's put this one in free, and this one as well. Ah, listen to that density. Beautiful. Alright, now the transpose. Everybody together. Alright, or I can just control a single one. Control the middle one here. Turn up some of these cross modulations again. Make this one into an LFO. You can control how fast the LFO goes, see? Let's put these back in the kind of ratio. And control all of them via transpose. And let's make it so CV controls division. Stick it in the FM here. Open up the FM index. Yeah, and really literally, as long as I stay here, I will continue to find different textures, sounds, and drones and whatnot. And please excuse the kind of informal, chaotic, haphazard demonstration, but I think that you get the idea. This thing is an amazing instrument all by itself, and it's just a playground of frequency and phase modulation with an immense amount of outputs, of modulation inputs, of cross modulation possibilities, of normalizations, and etc. And it's just one of the most fun modules you can have on your modular. And if you want to know the technical details more directly, I do recommend you check out the manual or the overview video that Schlappi Design themselves have made. I think there are a few other videos out there as well that probably get more specific about the details of the operation. I just wanted to sort of take a little trip down the rabbit hole with this thing and explore some of the sounds that it's capable of doing. Hope you liked it. If you did, hit like, subscribe, and possibly join my Patreon. And stay tuned for the next video, which is going to be about the Oliveira Modular Signals module. And this one we will get a little bit more specific about what exactly it's doing, because that's the idea with the video here. So to kind of decipher what it does. But anyway, that's it for today. Thank you very much for watching. See you soon and stay noisy.